When it comes to your Lord of the Rings Heroes of Middle-earth account, do you feel lost? Do you feel like you need a little bit of a sense of direction, or are you a new player? If so, welcome to the companion video for my January 2024 farming guide. Today we're going to be looking at the full guide and then breaking down the individual parts to hopefully give advice to any player, whether you're a new player, whether you're a long-time free-to-play, a spender, and anyone in between. Without further ado, the January 2024 farming guide. Those who used the November edition of this farming guide will notice that it's been completely revamped. I've tried to remove a lot of the text on the guide and make it a little bit more intuitive in terms of what you should be going after. The guide is broken into sections that will discuss the guild campaign, the light and shadow campaigns, the key campaign nodes, the characters that are purchasable from various stores, the event unlocks, and then I've also included a section regarding characters that aren't quite on nodes yet. The overall goal of this guide is to help you accomplish three things. First, it's going to help you unlock Elron and Arwen's nodes in the campaign so that you can access Lord Elron. Second, it's going to set you up with the groundwork to be able to obtain Thoren once he's a little bit more accessible. And third, it's going to give you the bare bones to build multiple solid raid teams that are going to allow you to score 900k or more in more than one raid chapter. The guild campaign is full of solid characters that are very easily farmable, and in fact, since the game's launch, the fastest way to obtain a character at 7 stars is to access them through the guild campaign. Now, you'll notice that my recommendations do not include some of the characters that are available on the guild campaign now, and that's because we're trying to come up with the most efficient way for you to get a couple of legendary unlocks and maximize your efficiency in the raid. In order to do that, we do have to skip out on a few characters and teams. I'm not going to spend a ton of time here talking about these characters because I will cover a lot of them in more detail as we go through the other portions of the farming guide, but I do want to take a moment to go through this wheel and talk about each one. So Ugluk is a character that's incredibly useful throughout your journey in the game. Even without his full Isengard team, he's actually quite useful in multiple raid chapters. Ugluk is unlockable very early, and he's a free character as well. You get 15 shards, which is enough to summon him at 1 star. And that helps you access the Shadow campaign, and you're also able to do a lot of work in the guild campaign using Ugluk as well. So highly recommend getting him up and running as quick as you can. And I would even go ahead and get him to 3-star relatively fast before you move to some of the other guild campaign nodes. Pippin is a character that I don't recommend that you focus on early on. He's certainly a character you could use if you wanted to. Definitely if you're wanting to go for Road to Rivendell instead of a legendary, I would not recommend you do that. But it is possible. Pippin is a good character, and he's one that you're going to want to circle back to down the road. Ironhide is a character that recently, at least pre-glyphs, people were talking about not going after Ironhide with a new account just because of the fact that he's given to you for use on one of the later Shadow campaign nodes, but we'll talk about that later on. For now, it's safe to say that Ironhide should be farmed and focused on as part of your account because Ironhide can single-handedly carry Chapter 3 runs in the Mines of Moria raid because of the introduction of the Bloodlust glyph. In terms of where you should take your Ironhide, again, we'll talk about that a little bit in the Shadow campaign portion, but I would say it's sufficient to start out with just getting him unlocked, which is at 4 stars. Naramiri is a character that is going to be incredibly useful not only for your Lord Elrond unlock at 5 stars and eventually 7 stars, but she's also incredibly useful in the raid in multiple chapters. She allows Lord Elrond's team to get 900k and in some cases 1.5 million. Incredibly useful character, does not require a lot of gear investment. Grimpa is included here simply because he is one of the goblins that is required to unlock Thoren. You can safely ignore him to start out with, at least if you're not willing to spend quite a lot of gems to unlock Thoren before Great Goblin goes to a node. Gimli is included here because of his synergy with Legolas. I think that he is certainly worth your consideration. Maybe not early on in your account, but later on when you're looking for more characters to farm, Gimli has a lot of synergy with Legolas, and he does really well in several of the raid chapters, even as a plug and play. Elro here is probably the most important character on this list, and that's because he has incredible synergy with Eladin, who is another character that we are trying to unlock as part of this guide as quickly as we can. And he's really just going to carry your elf team early on before you get Elron unlocked. So highly recommend Elro here as your first 7-star character on your account, and even as your first 5-star character as well. There's really no amount of gear or resources that you could put into Elro here that will go to waste. You could take all of his abilities to tier 6 and you will not feel bad about it. Don't do that early on. You don't want to over-invest in one character when you're going to need a full team, but just want to put that out there for those who may be a little hesitant to develop Elro here. He's worth doing it. And finally, Bekaloo, and we will talk about Haradrim a little bit towards the end of this guide, but I am including Bekaloo here because she's an integral part of the Haradrim team. Her poisons will carry the team in Chapter 2, and she's really useful in some of the other chapters of the raid as well. Next, I want to talk about the supply stores. The supply stores are an easy way for you to actually derail your account, and that's done by investing in characters or resources that are very inefficient to buy from the stores. And for the most part, outside of the shards or character shards that I have recommended here, you don't really want to be buying too many things in the stores. Now, there are some exceptions. For example, anywhere that you can buy the rare ability mats, the purple ones, for anything other than gems, it is worth considering that purchase because I do think those are one of the biggest bottlenecks in the game, and even heavy spenders deal with that bottleneck to this day. A couple of other things that might be worth purchasing would be essences, in particular essences that can be purchased with gold or with your challenge tokens. Early on, it's really important to get those essences so that you can get characters geared up, more so than farming those to Beb shards. But let's first start with guild supplies. So in the guild store, that is one place that you are able to purchase those rare ability mats. But I would recommend that you start out spending most of those resources on your Wubete. And that's because you can get them unlocked at, I believe, 15 shards. So you can. It's a 1-star unlock, and he will immediately be plugged into your shadow team. Once you have your Wubete sufficiently built, you could consider switching over to Biffer. Personally, I think you want to get your Wubete all the way to 7-star before you consider working on Biffer, but I am leaving this here because I do think that that's the second place you want to move to once you have Wubete done. For the arena supplies, this one's a little bit different. So you are going to be given Aemir to start the game. You're going to be given 15 shards to get him unlocked. My recommendation would be to get Aemir to 2 stars at least. So get another 30 shards for Aemir. It shouldn't take you more than a few days to get that done. And that's going to allow you to push through that first phase of working through your light campaign. But I would actually recommend that you stop farming the Aemir shards around the 2-star mark and pivot over to Legolas. Legolas is going to take a while to get to 5 stars, but typically if you start playing the game soon after an Elrond event, it gives you plenty of time to get Legolas up to 5 stars. And there are other options if you want to pursue that to get to Elrond faster, or if you're trying to panic farm. But if you have the luxury of time, I would highly recommend that you start with Legolas as your leader. If you were not fortunate enough to get Legolas as part of the marquee event, you will have to get 100 shards before you can unlock him, but it's totally worth the wait. It takes maybe 3-ish weeks or so to get that unlock done. I've also included Golbers here because you will need Golbers for Thoren, and I think that he logically makes sense as your third farm in the arena store. If you're not going to focus on Thoren soon after Elron, and we still don't have Great Goblin on a farmable node in a few months whenever you start this guide, then I would say once you have your Legolas in good shape and you're ready to unlock Elrond at least at 5 stars, you could pivot back over to Éomer. I think Éomer is one of the greatest characters in the game. He's probably still in the top 10, even with the release of Gandalf and the Fellowship team, Balin's Expedition, Thorin's Marquise, and Thoren himself. Éomer is still a great character, and he's worth maybe switching back to after a while. Challenge supplies already hit on the fact that Tabeb is the best thing that you could purchase here other than the essences. I don't think that Bolg or Halberd are worth purchasing. You can certainly do that if you would like to. I don't think it hurts to get Halberd unlocked at 2 stars to get an account started. He could definitely help you in the raid if you have no other options. But realistically, once you do that, you need to spend most of your resources either on Tabeb shards or on the essences. And finally, I've included Gandalf here as a raid reward. I mean, you're not really going to be able to farm him outside of the shards that are given to you in your guild chest as well as your personal reward tracks. But Gandalf is a character that you want to get unlocked and up and running as quickly as you can once you get to the later stages of the game. The light campaign is going to be the first thing you start with when you come into the game. You're going to be given free Frodo and a free Strider, and you're going to start pushing through this campaign. What you want to be careful of is not to put any investment into Frodo. I would not do anything to him other than what the game forces you to do. I would put all of your resources into Strider until you're able to get a couple of these other unlocks. You'll also be getting Éowyn almost immediately, and certainly you can dump a little bit of resources into her. I've set these 2 Light and Shadow campaign portions of the guide up in phases. And I've done this because you want to be pivoting at key times. So this phase 1 is really just showing you what you're going to have to work with when you get started. And phase 2 is going to be the first part where you really have to dump some resources into the characters. I think that for phase 2, you should be able to get away with around level 40, gear 5, with your abilities at 3 for each ability. I think in general, all of these characters, you should be able to take them to ability level 3 and not feel bad about it. You're not too strapped for resources to get that done on, let's say, a total of 10 characters when you're starting out. There are a couple of exceptions here. For example, you wouldn't want to take Strider's leadership ability past level 1 until you're ready to start building out the hobbits. So be careful with things like that. And you can definitely get away with not developing Naramiri's basic or passive right out of the gate past tier 2. But for the most part, again, tier 3 is going to be your friend on this portion. Now, phase 3 is where you really have to start getting a little more resource intensive, and this is why you want to be very stingy with who gets resources. And my recommendation for phase 3 is that you take these characters to around the level 45 to 50 range, and you're most likely going to have to at least hit gear 6, but in some cases on some of these characters you may have to go to gear 7 to get it done. The beauty of the way this farming guide is set up is these 5 characters in Phase 3 are characters that you're going to be using for a very long time. So taking these characters to level 50 or level 60, Gear 7 or Gear 8 is not going to hurt your account. They're all worth taking that high. And so it's easy to recommend these characters as part of this phase. One thing that I would recommend is that you try to push as far as you can into the campaign without gearing the characters. As soon as you fail on a node, you know that you're going to have to take something up. And you have to kind of decide what was it that caused you to fail on that node so that you can bring certain abilities up. In a lot of cases, it's because you don't have enough stars, enough levels, or enough gear. Glyphs have made the campaigns a lot easier to get through than it was pre-glyphs and post the star changes, which happened feels like ages ago now. Your goal here is to try to get to this Elron node as quickly as you can, and I believe you can do that with the recommendations I've provided for Phase 3. The other thing I want to talk about here is the key light campaign nodes. So these are nodes that you're going to be using to access characters that will get you to certain places. For example, I've listed the characters that you'll need for the campaigns. So Malhir and Naraz are going to be needed for your Shadow campaign, and then Aethane is going to be needed for the first couple of phases of the Light campaign. So the first, 2, 3, maybe 4 chapters of the Light campaign. I've also included legendary requirements and raid teams here. You will need to farm out Lomian for your Lord Elron legendary. You'll need to farm out Orphers for the Thoren unlock, and then you'll need dwarves in both the Light and Shadow campaigns. You'll need Killy and Philly for those. And then for raid teams, I've included F2 and Frodo here. We'll talk about that towards the end of the video. And then finally, optional and preference characters. So Lord Balin, I've mentioned this on several videos in the past. I think he is the most impactful free-to-play accessible character in the game. Once you have Lord Elrond unlocked, Lord Balin takes a couple of chapters and makes them way easier, in particular Chapter 4, but he's also useful in Chapter 3 because he can cleanse a lot of those capture stacks. He's a character that you're not necessarily going to invest in right off the rip, but he's definitely a character that you should consider investing in down the road. And once Rumil and Orphan come to nodes, you'll be able to use those 2 characters for your Elrond unlock, which makes it more beneficial to have Lord Balin. I have included Brute and Azak here. Brute is just one of those things. If you wanted to use him instead of Ironhide, you certainly could. He's definitely good in PvP. I don't think he's quite as impactful as Ironhide because I think Ironhide does a better job in Chapter 3 of the raid. But I am including him here because he's a decent character. You're getting free shards through the web store, and he's on a pretty easy to get to node. But Azak's the one that is worth mentioning for Shadow campaign. I don't recommend that you use Azak as part of your group that gets the R1 unlock, but you certainly can, and we can talk about that more with the Shadow campaign teams. For the Shadow campaign team, you're looking at 3 phases as well, and again, you're given 3 of these characters, the Isengard trio, for free as you start the game, and you're going to be using them on the first few chapters of the Shadow campaign. You might even be using Ugluk in your arena team. Wubete, I mentioned you're going to have to buy from the guild store, but you will be using Wubete pretty early. For Phase 2, you should have Ironhide unlocked at this point. He's definitely something that you want to get up and running pretty quickly in your journey. However, you will be able to take Ironhide all the way to node 5-3, but the game gives you a free Ironhide to use as part of that node, and you won't be able to use yours, which means Phase 3 is going to be a little bit more difficult than your light campaign, because you're going to have to invest in a 6th shadow character. My recommendation is that you invest in Naraz. I think Naraz is incredibly useful in several of the chapters of the Mines of Moria raid, especially because he calls a summon, which is a large character. He's actually the only character in the game who can call a large character when you already have a large character in your squad, meaning you would have 2 large characters on the board. It's the only way to do it. He is a little bit squishy, but I think, again, very impactful character and worth using as your 5th. Now, I've listed here the key shadow campaign nodes, and you'll notice that I've provided optionally Morza here. Again, I think that your focus should be to use Isengard Trio until you are able to pivot away from them and maybe start working on your goblins or your Haradrim. So I don't necessarily value Morza and Azak anymore the way I used to. Azak's bleed is helpful in Chapter 2, and Morza's ability to call an assist is good in Chapter 1. His Dispel and haste ability are incredibly useful for Chapter 2, but I just don't think they're as helpful in terms of efficiency to get you to the R1 unlock. As with the light campaign, I have included some legendary requirements here. Got a goblin and a dwarf, and then which the goblin chef node is pretty difficult to get to in itself, but definitely worth getting that one on farm status as quickly as you can. And then for raid teams, again, I've included a Haradrim and a Road to Rivendell hobbit here, Marion Robel. Robel is an incredibly useful character. I probably should have included this as a caveat as well. You could really sub out your Dunhar for Robel. You're just going to lose a little bit of healing. But that's an option that you could have for Phase 3. And then the last thing that I'll point out here, for your Eowyn and Dunhar, I wouldn't take them past probably the 3-star point, because you're going to be getting rid of Eowyn really fast. And your Dunhar is he's definitely going to be a little bit squishy. You might have to go to the 3-star, or excuse me, the 4-star range, but I would not take Dunhar any further than that, because it is going to be a waste of resources. I should have mentioned this at the start, but for your Phase 3 teams, similar to the light side, you want to be doing level 45 to 50, Gear 7. You might be able to get away with Gear 6 for your Dunhar, maybe Gear 6 for your Naraz. You're just going to have to play around with it a little bit. In terms of stars, I think your Ugluk is probably going to have to go to 5 stars. Your Wubete probably needs to go to 4 or 5 stars. I wouldn't take your Dunhar, Malheur, or Naraz over 4 stars unless you just absolutely have to. We mentioned at the beginning of the video that there were 3 main goals to this farming guide, and the first one of those goals was to get to Lord Elron. I've set up the light campaign so that you can get Lord Elron at 5 stars relatively fast. I've tried to provide a little bit of optionality here. I mentioned that Leliel could be subbed in for Legolas, and I've also talked about the fact that Arwen and Elladan are you're going to need both of them for your Lord Elron team. So we're in a perfect world. You would have Arwen and Elladan pretty well built up by the time you unlock Elron, so that you have the full team ready to go right off the bat. I understand that if you're trying to get there quickly, it may not be possible. Something that I'm not sure I've already alluded to is the fact that when the game first released, there was a sort of 7-day starter pack that you would get for login rewards. And at the end of that 7 days, you would get Great Goblin at 3 stars, I believe. As of today, and I think as of the beginning of December, that character is now Arwen. So, kind of the beauty of going after Elladan first, getting the Elladan unlocked quickly, and then using Elodin at 5 stars to get your Elron is you don't have to push the Shadow campaign as hard. You'll already have R1 unlocked and usable at 3 stars without having to really push into that campaign. And you might be able to panic farm Elrond, or at a minimum, you're going to be able to plug in that 3-star R1 and get some use out of your elf team in the raid pretty quickly. And you might even be able to get some good use out of them in PvP as well. The last thing that I want to talk about for Lord Elrond is Rumil and Orphan. As of today, January 5th, it's about 2 o'clock at the time of recording this video, Eastern Time. These characters do not have a free-to-play accessible node. When these characters do get a free-to-play node, I think that it's going to provide a lot more optionality in terms of who you want to go after in order to get to your Elrond unlock. These characters go really well with Balin's Expedition, and Rumil in particular is really great with the Lord Elrond team in PvP, and he's also quite useful in the raid. He grants defensive, and he also has the ability to call us an assist, which is incredibly helpful in Chapter 1 of the raid. So I really love the fact that CG is going to be offering us many more ways to get Elrond soon. A lot of different paths you'll be able to take, and I'm looking forward to updating the farming guide so that we can come up with an even more efficient way to get to Lord Elrond very fast for new accounts. Thoren Oakenshield is the 3rd legendary and the newest legendary in the game. He's the 2nd legendary that will be accessed through character requirements. And in this case, Thoren is accessible through leveling up and gearing up your goblins. However, there are a couple of considerations that limit me from making a recommendation for free-to-play players to push their goblins and try to get the Thoren unlock quickly. Unfortunately, Great Goblin is not on a free-to-play accessible node. He is only available for purchase using gems, and it takes quite a lot of gems, several thousand, to be able to get Great Goblin to 5 stars. In that vein, I can't recommend that you completely go after Thoren. I do think that once you get some of your Lord Elrond requirements out of the way, it's not going to hurt to start building up your goblins in anticipation of Great Goblin getting a node, or in anticipation of pushing Udur's up quickly once he's on a farmable node. The problem with that is if you're starting your journey with the game today in January 2024, you only have a few months to get to Thoren, and I just don't think any character other than Great Goblin is going to make sense there. Something to think about for the future, and obviously I will be updating this farming guide probably in the next couple of months once we do have a free-to-play path to get to Thoren, so that you can make a decision on whether you want to go for Lord Elrond or Thoren first. I do also want to point out that even if you could get Great Goblin to 5-star or higher to get the Thoren unlock, you're going to be dealing with the fact that the second time that Thoren comes around to be unlocked, Bomber and Bilbo still won't have a node available for you to farm them on. Even if they do, they will have just been added as free-to-play farmable. If you're starting today, you won't even have Bilbo or Bomber unlocked unless you pay for them with gems. And so you're most likely going to be waiting until quarter 3 or closer to the end of the year to even unlock Thoren. However, I am going to leave this here. I do think that dwarves are a great group of characters to build up. You could work on your Bifur and use Bifur as a leader. You can use Balin as a leader, and you can kind of do this sort of elf/dwarf mashup. I think that Killy and Philly are incredibly useful in the raid just as kind of a plug-and-play duo because of the ability to call assists. I do think these characters are really great to build and work on, and I'm looking forward to CG making it easier for free-to-play players to unlock Thoren. The last thing I want to talk about is filling out your raid teams. Through the first few sections of this farming guide, we've talked about several teams, and you're most likely, once you have your Lord Elron unlocked, you're going to have a solid set of elves for a raid team. You're going to be able to use that Rohan trio, especially if you continue to develop it. You're going to be able to plug in your Ironhide, your Naraz. You'll be able to use some of those Isengard characters, and you're really going to be left at a crossroads. In the event that Thoren does become free-to-play accessible within the next few months, I would recommend that you go ahead and continue to build out those goblins, and you work on some dwarves, and you get Thoren up and running. In the event that Thoren does not become more free-to-play accessible in the coming months, then I think you need to be working on your Haradrim and your Road to Rivendell. You probably want to choose one or the other of these two teams and start pushing towards it. I think that you're probably going to have decent options either way you go. Your limitation with the Haradrim team is Tabeb is not really farmable. We talked about the limitations of the challenge store. It's unfortunate that it costs so much to obtain a character from the challenge store. I think there are calculations saying it could take upwards of a year to obtain Tabeb, especially if you don't have any shards starting out, like if you didn't do the marquee. So quite unfortunate that they have not fixed that yet. I still think that even with a 3-star Tabeb leading the Haradrim team, you could find some use for them, and you could start working on building that team out further. Road to Rivendell probably makes more sense for a free-to-play player. You're getting that Strider for free, and he's a great character to invest in for multiple teams while you're trying to build up your Road to Rivendell. You also sort of get Sam for free because you're unlocking him through the journey, so you're really just going to have to gear him up as you go. And then Pippin is very easy to get in the guild campaign. We talked about that. Pippin should be able to go to 7-star fairly quickly once you're at this point in the game. And then you're really just left with 2 hard node farms for Merry and Frodo. And Merry and Frodo are still going to be quite useful earlier on, like at lower stars. You really just want to get both of their basics to max. You want to get them to tier 6 as quickly as you can, as well as Pippin's heal to tier 6 as quickly as you can. With those 3, you really get the hobbits up and running. And then you could work on Strider's burn ability, getting it to tier 6, and maybe getting his passive and his leadership ability up to tier 4 as quick as you can. Hopefully this gives you sort of some optionality for filling out those raid teams once you get your Elrond unlocked. Well, that's going to wrap up our journey through the January 2024 farming guide. If you're still with me, I really appreciate the support. I hope that you have found this guide helpful. If so, please feel free to leave a comment down below, and I hope you'll consider liking and subscribing to the channel so that you'll get more content like this in the future. As always, this guide will be included on our Discord server. You'll find a link to that down in the description of the video, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Quantum out.